You are listening to Joygasm, a video game and movie podcast. I'm Russ, Xbox Live Toaster 360. He is Steve, Xbox Live Stevavitch. And it's a pleasure to entertain you in episode 155 today, January 8th, 2020. We have a fun show in store for you this evening. We are going to be catching up with each other before getting into a personal letter sent to us by a fellow Patreon supporter. So we're going to be getting into the nitty gritty of what he had to say regarding one of our previous episodes. And then we're going to get into our topic of the day, which is what makes a good boss fight. And with that said, Steve, it's like I can feel you in my noggin with the sultry, velvety sound of your voice, but I can't actually see you because we're in two different places.
Well, let me paint a picture here for you. I might as well just take a picture of what's going on and send it to you so you can put it on friggin' Instagram, because I have built a fort of cardboard, cotton, and more cotton, I guess, because I got a blanket over my noggin to help with the sound quality, the purity of my voice. And above that, surrounding that, I have couch pillows to help buffet the noise, because it's going to go right through the blanket.
Help to buffer?
Yeah. And then above that,
I to have help Warren Buffett the sound. What?
And above that, I have cardboard.
Cardboard, yes.
So it's kind of a makeshift jerry-rigged studio.
Well, in other words, you are having your very own personal fortnight?
But
Basically,
I'm breathing in a lot of my recycled air. I don't know how much of this is going actually outside. Like my exhale is going right back into my brain.
You're going to be loony in about 30 minutes. It's going to be great to hear your rationale and thought on the program. Actually, you don't even need to send that to me. You can take a picture of yourself and post it on the Joygasm pages there, Steve.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that.
Yeah.
Do that.
So, Steve.
Yeah.
I must say, it's a bit different being here and you there. I must say I miss your bald chrome dome.
I know you do. Mm-hmm. And I miss the reflection of your computer screen reflecting off your glasses back at me.
Yes. Someday we will make our victorious reunion, and it shall be filled with lollipop smiles. It'd be wonderful.
Nice.
What is going on in your world, though, Steve? I want to know. I mean, obviously, you've been watching stuff. Have you been playing anything?
Actually, no. Not since I got a little further in Star Wars. I haven't played anything else besides Shining Force 2 on mobile.
Oh, he's addicted once more.
Oh, yes.
As you shall be. Yes. Or should be.
But no, other than that, I know I should be playing other stuff, but I ain't. You know, I'm entertaining the wife, making sure she's getting her entertainment as well as mine. No pun intended there. Of course.
I just have this visual of you like you're like doing a little like 1920s like shuffle tap dance for it.
Hey! It's more like the monkey with the drum cymbal and harmonica.
and you got that like permanent grimace on your face, like yeah. You don't know if the monkey's having too much of a good time or is just playing psycho, you know. Your wife's like, yeah, what are you doing over there?
What did I marry?
Yeah. So continue, please.
Let's see. So I got Alien and Aliens in the mail. So we watched Alien and we are almost done with Aliens. So that's been awesome. And did I tell you last episode we watched Rocky 4? I did, didn't I? Or did I not?
You did, yeah.
I did, yeah. We're still on it. We still have to watch Rocky 5, but...
What did you think of the first Alien movie?
So I so far I'm liking the first Alien better than the second Alien. The only reason is because even though the second one, I think Sigourney Weaver does a better job acting. Like I'm really with her in this one. It seems like in the second one, they go, oh, we have these space marines and they're top notch. These guys know what they're doing. They're the cream of the cream. And they have the most state-of-the-art weapons. And then you see this Marine Force like, hey, yeah, I know. Let me give you a homie handshake. We're going to go blow up some bugs. Hey, brother. Hey, what's up, man? And, it's like, okay, did you guys just get off the surfboards in California and grab some boomsticks? Or are you actually trained as well as... this official said you were. I don't know. So
you got to remember too that when the movie came out, it was the early 80s, and that was all about that kind of style. And not to mention the type of tech that was in that movie was for its time. Bleeding edge.
I guess, Russ.
But it makes it more campy that way. Like in today's world, you look at it and there's a lot of stuff that's just laughable. But there's definitely a nostalgic, classic. I don't know, just a pop culture icon of a movie,
I hear that, Russ. I just didn't expect it to be that campy. You know what I mean?
The other thing, too, is that the directors were different. In the first film,
that
you had
is
Ridley
true.
Scott. And in the second film, you had James Cameron.
They, on the rentable Blu-ray, you can actually watch the original version versus the director's version.
Oh.
So we're watching the director's version of both films.
Very cool. I'm glad that you're finally able to see that because both those movies are heavily revered in the pop culture society. With there was both of those directors actually were a lot younger, and so those movies were a lot more raw, and you can tell that there were certain things about them that for its time actually worked out really well and were novel ideas. And then if you think about like Ridley Scott's career or you think of James Cameron's career, you can tell how like they continued to polish some of their approaches to cinema and storytelling. But those movies were like pretty early on in their careers.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. What's nice too is that now that the family has left, we don't have to be as considerate with the volume. So we can crank it, and it doesn't matter who we wake up because neighbors have their own insulation in their houses. I don't know if they can hear us or not, but either way, we're enjoying a lot louder Aliens than we otherwise would have.
What did your wife think of him?
I think she's actually seen him before. Because she's starting to predict stuff that's going to happen, and I'm looking at her. I'm like, oh, wait a second. How did you see this already? She's like, I think I may. When I got the movie, she goes, oh, I haven't seen him. I've heard of him. I go, okay, great. And then we start to watch him. She starts predicting everything. And I'm looking at her and she goes, I may have seen him. I'm like, nuts. All right. Well, I guess that's fine. Like, whatever, but I haven't seen him. But she it's the tendency to go, okay, this person, yeah, they're actually going to be alive. Okay, watch. Okay, see, I told you. I'm like, great, thanks. He goes, okay, this person over here, yeah, something bad's about to happen. I'm like, stop.
Or maybe she is a byproduct of the conditioning through decades and decades of cinema that these directors introduced back in the day. So therefore, because they are a bit more at their beginning stages and having to be raw, she's able to easily predict what's going to happen. You never know, Steve.
Possibly.
You never know.
Possibly.
So, but you said you didn't play anything?
No, I didn't play anything. Not yet. Okay. This weekend it's going to be different, but I haven't played anything.
Understandable. Well, I am in the same boat as you in the sense that I didn't play anything this past week. I did watch James Bond. I always forget what it's called. Spectre. And, if you recall, we had a conversation where we were talking about the upcoming James Bond film, and I couldn't recall if I had actually seen Spectre or not. The weird thing is I think I saw like half of it, because when I was watching, I was like, yeah, actually, I remember this and this, but I don't remember that. And so I must have, I don't know if I was at a friend's house or what the deal was, but in any event, I'm just glad that I made time to check it out and just really set myself up for the new movie that's coming out this year.
I'm glad too, Russ.
I'm glad that you're glad, because you saw it, didn't you? You saw Spectre.
Yeah, I saw Spectre, of course I did.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I saw Spectre there. God, I still can't believe it's going to be Daniel Craig's last hurrah.
Still think he's making a mistake.
Well, he's kind of getting old, isn't he?
Doesn't matter.
I think the first film he made for James Bond was 2006.
Yeah, he's still walking, isn't he?
Oh.
How old was Sean Connery when he stopped making James Bond? Huh?
I think he was pretty young. I don't know exactly what his age was, but I think he probably put his cap on the rack there, probably in his, I don't know, 40s maybe, something like that. I'm not exactly sure. When he still had some lead left in his pencil for the rock. You know what I'm saying there?
Bond, yes. James Bond, shaken not stirred.
I must be dreaming. Do you fancy my Walter PPK?
Where is my Aston Martin?
License to kill. I'm a secret agent. It's really funny when you think of all those things. Like, only he could pull that off. Where it's like, it actually sounds so manly.
Or that and the kind of the snicker grin that he always has when he's speaking.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, right.
Oh yeah, totally. So other than that, I have actually been busy with the transition, which is the fact that this week I started my new job at 2K Games Silicon Valley. So that has been a whirlwind of a week, and everybody's been fantastic. I actually have not met everybody on the team yet. I've met quite a few of them, and everybody's absolutely lovely. And I'm very much looking forward to being able to work on this project with them and go on, hopefully, what will be a nice long developmental journey. But it's pretty crazy to be back in the Bay Area. I think it's really cool to go down these roads. You're going into the North Bay and the East Bay, and going into San Francisco, and there's like a flood of memories that comes back. I was actually a little rusty on some of the highways because I think the last time I was there was for your wedding, but we really only stayed in the Marin area. We didn't really go too far out of the beaten path, so to speak, but it was fun. I got to pick up my car. It was fine. It was good. I picked up at a friend's house. So Billy, if you're listening, thank you very much for watching out for my car. By the way, I don't know if I told you this, Steve. My battery was dead.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I go to pick up my car, and they were nice enough to actually make me dinner and that sort of thing, and that was fantastic. And it was probably around like 10 o'clock or something at night, and I decided I was going to take my suitcases that I had brought with me during the flight and put them in my car. And so I did so, and I noticed that the trunk was actually not latched. It wasn't open, but like it certainly wasn't latched down. It wasn't locked. I was like, oh, I wonder what caused that. And I was thinking it's probably when they exchange keys and either the driver or somebody was trying to lock the car. Or I don't know. But anyway, I try to start the car, and it will not start. I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is happening. And luckily, Billy is quite the mechanic. The man is a handyman, let me tell you. And he happened to have one of those portable wheel out turnover type generator things. You hook it up to your car, and then you're able to get a charge and that sort of thing. So I was able to do that and made my way home. And then I was able to actually start it the next day after that, and it's been running fine ever since. But that was kind of the one like uh-oh moment that I had when I came out here, and luckily it was all good after that. So I've just been getting settled into the new job and been finding out what the project is, and my lips are sealed, Steve. I signed away my life to a litany of NDAs, and that's okay. But I'm here to tell you, Steve, that there is massive potential with this game. And hopefully you'll be able to check it out in the not too distant future. But anyway, I'm very grateful and thankful for the opportunity. And it is a bit of a sacrifice in the sense that my family is still in Texas. And so we have been FaceTiming it up like crazy during the week, being able to get some time in with my daughter as well as my wife and even you, Steve. Get a little FaceTime with the old bros, see how you doing. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I know. Called us right in the middle of the movie. I get you.
Oh, I know. I tend to do that. So let us pivot to the message that we received. So earlier in the week, we received an email from PJ and his son, who I believe his name is Trenton, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it says in the email there, Russ. So I would venture to guess that'd be correct.
Well, it has. I'm looking at the email. Does it say his name? Does it say Trenton?
Yes, it does.
Oh, excellent. Anyway, they wanted to send us their feedback from our Star Wars Rise of Skywalker review, which, of course, if you guys are interested, you can check out. It's only, I want to say, like 2 episodes back.
2 episodes back and 2 hours long, baby.
That's right. And so this is really cool. I thought that we could go kind of chunk by chunk and read out loud like just what it was that they had to say and then have ourselves comment on it, just because I think it's really cool that they took the time to be able to write this. And this is a pretty in-depth email here, so I say let's get right into it. Let's jump into it. It starts off saying, "Hey Russ and Steve, I listened to your podcast about Star Wars Rise of Skywalker with my son. We have a few things that I would like to clarify and give a different point of view. I would like to start by saying that The Last Jedi was a complete waste of time. Agreed. I hated it and will not support Rian Johnson again, regardless of how great he was before. Here are a few things that my son Trenton and I were yelling at the podcast." That's when we know we at least we've got some engagement, like when we cause people to yell at our podcast.
Right.
So number 1, light speed skipping. He says, if you remember how many TIEs were chasing them, it was so many. They went to light speed and it went down by a lot. In the original trilogy, the Empire would be able to figure out where the rebels were going, but it was a guess. So watching the number of TIEs they keep reducing in numbers after each jump, I think that this was a great concept and did not need to be fully gone over. From the second viewing, Finn is telling Poe not to do it again because Rey was not there. Also, we know that Poe is the best pilot from episode 7, so Poe is going to be able to do this with no problem. Steve, do you have any comments toward that?
I see that it's a cool concept, the light speed skipping. And so I'm not necessarily knocking it as a concept, but I just don't think it necessarily made sense. I know that Poe was a great pilot, but he can't anticipate what's going to be in the way when he just light speed skips and doesn't have any sort of computer calculation of what he might hit or what he might not hit. And so, I mean, yeah, it's a very risky thing. I think they went out way on a limb. And actually, I think also in the previous movie, they were saying how the TIE fighters can't go into light speed. So I don't know. I didn't see that. I didn't. At some point, I got so angry at the last movie, not episode 9, but episode 8, that I think I stopped paying attention, but I think that's a nugget that I do remember. But anyhow, I haven't watched that movie very many times for obvious reasons, but my blood pressure can only go so high.
Exactly.
But anyhow, definitely a cool concept. I just still think it's a bit of a stretch.
And so when I look at it, I actually really liked the concept of light speed skipping. I think that was really cool. My issue was they didn't really spend enough time with it because it was something that was such a novel idea and something that I actually welcome in the world of Star Wars. So for them to do it very quickly like that and then never explore it ever again, it is a bit of a bummer. I am thankful that it did make it into the film. I would rather it be there than not at all. And I think too, these movies, the way I interpret them is there is a certain amount of time that has passed between episodes. So like from episode 7 to episode 8 and from episode 8 to episode 9, I don't view it as if like the curtain comes back up and it's right, the second after the previous movie finished. I think it has been some time, whether it's months or years, something like that's in there. Not too many, mind you, but for me, I think that is why I'm willing to believe more of the light speed skipping being implemented into something like a TIE fighter. Simply because if you recall in episode 4, the TIE fighter is a short-range fighter. In fact, Ben Kenobi was the one who said that. And so we know that due to that fact that there's no way that it would have any kind of light speed capability. They were completely reliant on the Star Destroyers to dock, and that sort of thing. But having said that, perhaps in the time that has passed since episode 4, maybe they have been able to come up with technology. You never know. Did you have something else you were going to say, Steve?
No, I was going to say, yeah, we never know because they didn't lead us on to believe that was the case. We just have to assume that's the case.
The second item is that C-3PO mind wipe. This was a great thing to do because he could not speak a forbidden language. I can totally believe that he could not speak it. Remember that Anakin made him back in episode 1. He was part of the Senate in episode 2, 3, and the start of 4, working for Bail Organa. In the movie, he said that he could not speak because of a Senate bill. C-3PO was cut off because Poe said he did not care. Steve said, and Steve meaning you, Steve.
Right.
Said that he could not understand why he could not say the language. It makes sense that the Senate was controlled by the Sith and they would not allow any old protocol droid to read it and give away their plans. What say you to that, Steve?
Yeah, I can accept that. I would also think that with the level of technology, they could take the valuable information that was stored on C-3PO and maybe transfer it to R2 because R2 can transfer information and it wouldn't have to be that big of an ordeal to go, we got to wipe C-3PO's memory and then who knows how he's going to be afterward. He's not going to remember a single thing because they could take all the good data they want to keep, give it to R2, wipe C-3PO's brain, put the memory back on, done deal.
There you go. The world of possibilities. The third item is that Lando, Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie. Lando was great, but I feel that we have had time to fall in love with him and the other characters. We had years of books, games, comics, and other media to fill in their backstories. They were never going to replace them with the new trilogy of characters. I feel that they tried to incorporate all the different aspects into each of the characters so that we could have any of them on the screen and be able to use them in multiple ways. Did it work? I have a mixed feeling about it. I do like getting more of Poe and Rey's background. I do like the fact that Finn was going to tell Rey that he is becoming Force sensitive. I think that Finn being Force sensitive is a great twist since he was a stormtrooper to start. So, and it kind of continues on, but there's actually a lot of details in here. My thing, and I think Steve, I'll answer this one. I think our beef was just that Lando was so limited in terms of his screen time in the movie. And I think one of the problems that we have had with this new trilogy is how the beloved characters were treated and how they were written to kind of conclude themselves in the trilogy. And I think that we both wish that there was just a different approach overall to the whole thing. And we understand too, and I'm speaking for you, Steve, so please correct me if you don't agree here.
Right.
But I do completely anticipate there to be a next generation of characters, if you will. I just think that some of the decisions that were made in terms of the passing on of the torch were not executed as well as they could. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would have liked to see this trilogy end with all the heroes that I've grown to love and, just continually watch the movies over and over and over and over again. I'd like to see them go out with a heroic bang and not necessarily how they did. I just think they kind of wiped off the old characters, brought them back here and there for nostalgia's sake, and then just forced the new characters on us when they should have introduced us to the new characters in a whole different new trilogy. Because if they started a new trilogy and then they go, oh, here's Rey, here's Poe, here's Finn, I think that would have been a lot different because we could have maybe not been limited to this trilogy, but they could have had a lot more time to expand on that story.
Yeah. He continues on saying that we are shown a promising start with episode 7, but it is thrown off course in episode 8 with the new characters. I'm not very happy with the way that they handled Luke and Rey in episode 8, but understand what the underlying thought was. I never thought that the new characters were going to replace the original. To me, this trilogy was meant to be a passing of the torch to the next generation and beyond. Yep. I think we agree on that. Lando should not be, this is PJ talking, be the head of the Resistance, and here is why. Number one, he was not going to go and see Leia because he was hiding out on some distant planet and was not looking out for anyone other than himself after Luke left. Number two, he was a general around the same age as Finn and Poe. The argument, well, here, let's start with number one here so we don't get too into the weeds here. When he said he was not going to go see Leia. So I think, for me personally, I think that was a creative mistake. I think that one of the benchmarks of this new trilogy is seeing a reunion of our favorite characters. And I think that it's beyond me why they decided to separate all of these characters, because when you have them all together, that's the secret sauce.
Right. And
for some reason, like, all of these characters are sprinkled now throughout the galaxy, and it just really doesn't make any sense. It's like at the end of Return of the Jedi, they're celebrating. It's a jubilee.
Right. Everybody's together before the Empire is defeated. Like, there's going to be, the largest threat is eliminated. Let's, we can rebuild, regather.
So when it comes to that,
not going to hiding. Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense why they would all be so scattered like that. And I think it is due to the treatment that they gave of having this high level idea that there's kind of this melancholy vibe about the situation at hand, and everybody's kind of in hiding. It just doesn't make any sense why they would do that after Return of the Jedi. Not to mention the fact that, like I said, everybody wants to see these characters together. And the only time that we kind of sort of see it is when Han, Leia, and Chewie briefly come back together. And that's probably one of the high points of episode 7. Number 2, when he said he was a general around the same age as Finn and Poe, the argument that they were not established is not right. Poe had extensive knowledge of the Resistance and had covered many battles for Leia. Finn was asked to help out Poe by Poe himself, and Poe asked Finn to be a co-leader because he wanted to help. Or actually, he wanted help, excuse me. This shows that Poe understands that he was in over his head and needed help from the people that he trusted himself. So when it comes to that, I think in my situation, I look at how when we're introduced to Lando, he is a very capable leader in the sense that he's running Cloud City in Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
So he's essentially the governor of that huge place. I mean, it's not like it's some little village or a town. Like that is a massive structure that houses who knows how many beings and that sort of thing. So, and even as the empire began to take over and threaten to leave a garrison and everything else, he was very decisive. He was very quick on his feet. Not to mention the fact that if you were to look at his so-called resume, if you will, even after the Empire Strikes Back, he had been promoted through the Rebel Alliance in Return of the Jedi. So he was already on his way up to becoming like a general, due to the fact that they were making the run on the second Death Star. So like his credentials precede himself. Like he is more than capable and fit to be able to lead. Not to mention that the amount of swagger, clout, and reputation that he has also go hand in hand in terms of being a leader. And I think it was just, my personal opinion was that it was too convenient for a character like Finn to be like, or excuse me, Poe, to say, oh, well, okay, well, I'm going to be in charge, and hey, Finn, you want to help me out? Oh, okay, sure. You know, like it was too like, no.
Right.
And my thing is that Poe is a very good fighter. That is very true. I agree.
Right. Yeah.
But being someone who's like a flyboy star pilot is very different from being someone in a position at like a general where you are really having to make tactical decisions.
Right. And tough and hard to make decisions.
Exactly. Anyway, let's see here. Number 3, he wrote down. He did not really want to help out, but made his way back to the Resistance because of Rey. I remember that happening in the film. Number 4, Lando had all his connections from when he was on Bespin, which makes sense as to why he was able to ask and get so many other pilots out there helping with the Resistance. That's true. I agree with that. He says, please don't get me wrong. I love the original trilogy and love all of those characters, but I am willing to see what Disney can do with the franchise. Is there going to be missteps? Yes. I mean, do you love all of the Marvel movies? I sure don't. And that's a good point. I agree with that too. Doctor Strange was just Iron Man. Iron Man 3 was the absolute worst. Yeah, that part I do agree with. And I hated Baron Zemo from Civil War. But do I love what they have done? What does it say? Do I love what they have done and the overall stories that they are telling? Disney and Kathleen Kennedy will have some missteps, but overall the story that they are telling, and I am happy to say that they have something new rather than nothing at all. So I'll pause there for a second. And that's good. You know, I'm glad that there are people who are enjoying it. You know, I think that that's what is great about entertainment. You know, if there's something that's there that causes someone to have a good time and they're enjoying themselves, then more power to them. It's not my place to say, no, you shouldn't feel that way. So, did you have anything to add to that or not?
No, I mean, I agree. I still think that it's a lot more than a misstep. I mean, the entire Star Wars community is divided. I mean, I can accept a misstep, be like, oops, that was our mistake. Sorry about that. We're gonna put this thing on pause and get back on the rails again, and we'll have a lot better movie for you next time. And even though they're in correction mode, I mean, the community is still like way divided. I just think they completely mishandled the entire thing. I look forward to see what they bring next. I mean, and yeah, I would like to see more Star Wars. That's a great point. I'd rather see more stuff happen in the Star Wars world than nothing at all. And I can really appreciate PJ's positive attitude. I mean, I'm loving it, but I just think it was a crazy lot more than just a misstep on Disney's end, for sure.
He continues on saying that this may be the way that I look at it because I have 2 wonderful kids that look at these characters as theirs and see the value of the ones that have come before. The last thing that I want to hit on is Rey/Palpatine. I think that it was a great way for J.J. Abrams to fix what Rian Johnson did wrong from episode 8. To think that Palpatine was controlling everything from the shadows is an outstanding idea and makes you wonder what else he could have done or have had his hand into. In Battlefront 2, he was a clone that was controlling a robot. This shows that they could have brought him back earlier and were thinking about it back then. Rey, being the granddaughter of Palpatine, is great and helps explain why she could pick up a lightsaber and fly anything with no issue. Were you able to get behind Luke doing that in episode 4? He just picked up the lightsaber with Obi-Wan and had no issue not cutting off his own hand. He also just jumped in an X-Wing and took out a Death Star. So I'll pause it right there. I think I even said this during a review. I agree with you. I think that the idea of her being Palpatine's granddaughter is actually a cool idea. I really dig it because up until this point, we've really had a lot of focus on the family dynamics on the Jedi side, but we haven't really explored much on the Sith. And the Sith, up to this point, has always been kind of these dark, shadowy figures that come and they just want to wreak havoc and death and everything else.
And there's nothing for bad sake. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's your classic good versus evil kind of storytelling. And it's like, yeah, no, I don't have a problem. But at the same time, it does make it more interesting to take on kind of a twist like that. And I mean, let's be real. I could totally see Palpatine having some concubine honeys somewhere, and he's like, yeah, the dark side I sense in you. You know, just all that kind of stuff. You know, he's by no means clean as a preacher's sheets. You know what I'm saying there, Steve? Did you have anything to
add? Yeah. Well, yes and no. I mean, I don't know. I think it was cool to see Palpatine. I think I said that in the episode a couple weeks ago, but nothing was going to survive that blast at the end of Return of the Jedi. I mean, if he could survive that, then he's going to survive whatever happens to him, and nothing's going to kill him. I mean, that whole entire Death Star exploded, and there's not even bacteria that's going to live.
What if he had a love fest the day before?
Yeah.
And then sent her on her merry little way. He's like, don't call me, I'll call you.
Yeah. But anyhow, even with Rey being his granddaughter, there's a plot hole there because what happened? They did the Force just skip a generation because they were saying in the movie prior that Rey's parents were nobodies. So I guess we'll never know if they had any kind of Force abilities or not. Like, I mean, if they were nobodies, then I don't see how Rey could have the gene or the ability and not like Palpatine's son or daughter or whoever it was. You know, so
but we also don't know if they don't have it either. I mean, like they really left that up as an unknown.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's just a plot hole.
Well, but I don't necessarily think it is a plot hole per se. Like I could see it as a plot hole, but I also think too, some of the fun things about these types of movies is you don't have to explain away every single solitary thing that comes up. I think it is fun to have certain items left unexplained because then it just allows you to kind of fill them in. I think there needs to be a kind of a surgical approach to it though, because you have to be careful which items you choose to be that way versus other ones you don't. Like if you think of episode 4, when Luke is talking with Obi-Wan Kenobi after he first meets him, you hear Ben Kenobi talk about, or he doesn't really talk about it, he just kind of mentions it. He mentions the Clone Wars. In fact, Luke said, "You fought in the Clone Wars?" Mm-hmm. And it was the coolest thing because it was just a fleeting mention of the Clone Wars that we would later on come to see in the prequels, which was the Attack of the Clones. And so, it wasn't like they had to fully explain that. And I think we saw the danger in episode 1 of over-explaining things. Like, for instance, when Qui-Gon Jinn was talking to Anakin, and Anakin's like, "Master Jedi, I was wondering, what are midi-chlorians?" And then, Qui-Gon's like, "Well, Timmy, let me explain the scientific nature of it." And it's like, no, you don't do that. So he wraps up here and he says, he also just jumped in an X-Wing and took out a Death Star. Rey was on a scavenger planet and was able to learn about the different ships and had the Force with her. We even saw her take out bad guys with the boa staff that she was wielding, so it makes sense that she could use a lightsaber. If you look at the fight in her first encounter with Kylo Ren to the last fight at the end of episode 9, she is more graceful and controlled. Also in episode 1, we saw that Anakin could build a robot at the age of 9 and control a pod racer with no experience and win his first race. Also, we saw Anakin take out the droids in a fighter craft with no problem. So I feel that as long as we know someone has the Force, then they will be able to control any machine that they want. Okay, so this section is dealing with kind of just how invincible and OP Rey is as a character. And I still disagree. I feel I have the opposite view. I think that in movies like Star Wars, it's important to not allow the Force to be or possess this notion of instant gratification. I do agree on the point that Rey was not as refined in her lightsaber wielding skills from episode 7 as opposed to episode 9. And I do appreciate that. But when it comes to just her overall, like she had no flaw. She had no vice. And I stick to my guns on that one because Daisy Ridley was a fantastic casting choice. Her acting is great. And the look of it is really, really cool. My issue though is, once again, it's not, she's as a character, she's not relatable because she can do no wrong. And not to mention the fact that everything that had to be really heavily earned as it applies to the Force in the older films, she just kind of did on a whim and she had no fatigue. And, you know, it goes, I use that classic example of how Luke, when he was being trained by Yoda, how it really took a lot of focus and concentration for him to lift just a few rocks. And we see in episode 9 how Rey is just kind of having fun being trained by Leia, and she's got like 50 boulders. And actually, even in The Last Jedi, before she was having some training by Leia, she was able to lift all those huge boulders from where the resistance were they were trapped and they were trying to get out. And you're just like, no, like that would absolutely decimate her. She probably would like fall unconscious for a bit. There's just, I think that there is consequence to actions like that. And I think it's important to keep that in place just because you begin to trivialize the Force otherwise. If it becomes a participation trophy, and again, this leads into one of the points that PJ also made about how Finn was Force sensitive. I think also that was a mistake. I think that you run the Force itself is not just something that anybody can do. In fact, in the books and whatnot, they talk about this too, and actually Rogue One, the movie, they reinforce this notion where like people can know about the Force, they can study it and everything else, like such as the blind man. But
the Force will be not with the Force. The Force will be not with the Force. The Force will be not with the Force. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And what I thought was really cool about that in Rogue One was how you could have people who understood the power of the Force and how important it is to have it in your life, but he had no mastery of it. He had no control over it. And I thought that made for a very interesting character. And I think if I were to compare that to what was going on in episode 9, at that point in time, it's like, Finn has this thing he's dying to tell Rey over and over and over again, and people have deduced that, he's Force sensitive. And I'm like, yeah, I don't buy it. Right. I think that's too convenient, and it needs to be a rarity. And the reason why, I'll tell you why. I want all of you to listen carefully about this.
Oh boy, here it goes.
When it comes to the rarity of the Force, it makes for a much more compelling visual spectacle when someone is actually capable of controlling it. If everybody is able to be Force sensitive or manipulate the Force in some way, shape, or form, and again, I'm using that loosely. I don't mean a blanket statement because clearly they didn't do that in the films, but the more people who are able to manipulate and control the Force, the less memorable or special the Force is, because now everybody, or let's say several people in the movie, can do so, rather than if you think of like in the original trilogy, it was only Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. He's only in there in one film, except for like his little ghost image in Return of the Jedi. But when you think of how Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker were the only ones And, the Emperor was in there, but he didn't really do anything with lightsaber, and he had some lightning and stuff, that sort of thing. Fine, I'll give you that. But it was very sparse. It was very few and far between. And I think it's important to maintain something like that. Because if you recall, too, in The Last Jedi, at the end, they cut back to the little slave children or something that are on the casino island, and you could tell the boy is also force sensitive. He's able to just kind of pull the broom over to his hands before he starts sweeping out the alien horse stall.
Right.
So anyway, I just don't want the force trivialized, but PJ ended up ending the email just saying, thank you for all that you guys do. We do enjoy hearing a different view about movies, games, and pop topics. And to that I say, it is an absolute pleasure to serve you, Mr. PJ, as well as you, Mr. Trenton, and all of our other fans and listeners that listen out there, because that's, kind of the reason why we do this is we always love to be able to talk, shop, and geek out about these sorts of things. And I, for one, really like hearing different types of opinions and perspectives on things.
And that's what it's all about, Russ's perspective,
Exactly. It's time for the topic of the day. So our topic of the day is what makes a good boss fight. This is a fun idea that we were talking about the other night, and what we want to do is just have fun talking about the different components that each of us feel go into what makes a boss fight, for lack of a better word, good. So
bossy.
Bossy, like a boss. So we also thought that we could give perhaps a few examples of some of our own personal favorite boss fights. But Steve, I am curious to hear your thoughts, just from a high level understanding. What in your opinion makes for a good boss fight in any given video game?
So I got a few thoughts, Russ. I would say, to start off, a balance of predictable and the unpredictable. So, for example, you can't have a boss that you're watching and he goes, okay, after every 3 jumps, he's going to swing a sword and I'm going to duck and I'm going to miss it and I'm going to hit him. Okay, 3 more jumps and I'm going to duck and I'm going to swing and I'm going to hit him. Okay, a lot repetitive pattern. He has to be a bit, but he can't be undefeatable. He can't be like completely like, you don't know what I'm going to do, because otherwise it wouldn't be that fun to defeat the boss. So I would say a balance of the predictable and the unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? You picking up what I'm throwing down?
It does. I smell it. You're stepping in, because I too have that on my list, and I actually have labeled it as. Don't. I do. I have labeled it as expect the unexpected. Continue.
I would say correct software written that applies to both hero and boss. So, like, for example, if you're jumping around trying to dodge an attack, and you can only jump up or you can only jump forward, but the boss can jump and then stop and then move backwards before he hits the ground. Just because he's like programmed to hit you if like he's in a certain parameter between you and him. I'm like, wait, hold on, what? Or for example, if your hero is, if you're able to dodge, but if the boss is still like, if he's doing a certain attack that's like unblockable and he's in reach, no matter if you can dodge or not, he's going to grab you and he's going to hurt you. And I think the worst example of that is probably This is dating myself, but when the Lord of the Rings came out and they made games on it, like the Lord of the Rings games, I remember fighting like a bad Ent, I think it was. And when the Ent reached for me, all my character could do was like stand there and freak out going, oh my gosh, I'm going to get picked up by this thing and I'm going to, get hurt. And so there was nothing I could do, even though dodge and slash and jump were all these commands. I couldn't do anything and every single time. So anyhow, wasn't limited to that game, but I'm just thinking if we're all going to be in this world and exist like we would in the Matrix, where all rules apply to everybody, sort of, unless you break some rules, of course, but maybe that was a bad example. I don't know. I just think the software needs to apply. Hey, if you're going to program one person to jump and they can't stop in midair to reverse their momentum, then neither can the boss. Makes sense?
It makes sense, but I don't know if I agree with that. Just because part of being a boss is that they're naughty. They don't play by the rules. They make up their own rules, and it's up to you to vanquish them regardless.
I would say the type of boss that can exhibit your level of badassery. So the hero ain't nothing without the villain, but if you can be the tiny little bugger and you're taking on Goliath and you can take him down because you've mastered your art and your skill and you have your counterattacks down and your dodges down, and it's inspiring and confidence building to say that I started from nothing. And And then I got to you, and then you're everything that was threatening me, and now I'm the one who's beating you up. I'm the little guy. I'm the little dog who's taking on the big dog, and I'm making him look like a fool in front of his friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is as long as the gameplay mechanics are fair in the sense that whatever kind of move list that you are given, if you are able to master it, then you're able to take out whichever kind of boss you're fighting. That makes for a good boss.
Yeah,
boss fight.
Absolutely. I mean, you can see the villain as a huge threat, and you're thinking, oh man, here we go. We're gonna lock horns. But it has to be a level of, okay, here's where I started, here's where I'm finishing. And even though the boss is big, Mr. Big Buff Rough and stuff, and now here's little old me, and I'm taking him down. Exactly. I'm not saying like you just got to be like simple. I'm just saying that there's got to be enough to let me spread my wings of badassness.
Of course. Did you have anything else?
Yes, one last thought, Russ. I would say a good boss fight needs to have a level of magnificence.
Oh.
So the boss can't all just be ugly. He can't just every boss can be like,
I want him dead sexy.
No, actually, what I was thinking of is like a lot of the bosses in Castlevania Lords of Shadow are actually a spectacle to look at. I mean, yes. they are rather beautiful. I mean, I looked forward to the boss fights, and they were difficult to say the least. But I mean, one boss fight that sticks out in particular was you were at this castle, but there was a lot of bridges that you had to cross that were very, very high up. I remember I called you right after this happened, and it was probably a night you were wanting to make sweet love to your wife, but I called you anyway. Anyway.
What? I don't think I was married when you were playing it.
I don't know. Maybe you were. I don't know. Anyhow.
This comment brought to you by Left Field.
And so anyhow, you had to defeat like this like crow kind of creature, but it was a bunch of crows and the one crow, and it had a bunch of black mist. I mean, it looked fantastic. And I mean, I almost felt sorry for taking the thing down, but I had to do what must be done. But anyhow, I loved all the boss fights, and I just think that, a boss fight should be an absolute spectacle to fight in.
Yeah. No, it's good that you brought up Castlevania Lords of Shadow, because I actually have that in my list as well. So, was there anything else, Steve?
Well, I can give you some examples, Russ.
Well, here, let me go into a little bit of my high level before we get into the samples there, because I'm glad to hear a lot of what you're saying there, Steve. I wrote down a few things here. One about what I feel makes a good boss fight is the showmanship. And I think that is similar to what you were describing, where I like my boss fights to have, if you think about the ones that are memorable, there is a certain level of flair, right? There is a certain level of, it's this huge spectacle, and they almost do that in a way to intimidate and to cause you to doubt yourself and your abilities. And so I definitely look for showmanship in a good boss fight. The second thing is similar to what you were talking about, where I like to have bosses that test my skill. And I like how in a game that is filled with bosses, I think it's fantastic if with every boss that you come across, they test your skills in a different capacity. And if you're able to overcome that, it's like, okay, now you can move forward. So the third thing is also what you had mentioned, which is expect the unexpected. I think that especially in recent times, there have been a really neat analysis of boss creations, so to speak. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But I feel as though there was this renaissance of awesome epic boss fights that happened during kind of like the 8-bit, 16-bit era. And then they began to kind of fall by the wayside a little bit. Like you still had like certain really good boss fights during 32-bit and 64-bit, that sort of thing. But I feel as though within the Xbox 360, PS3, PS4, Xbox One, we have actually seen a resurgence of a lot of really intuitive, well, not really intuitive, I'm sorry, more of like a novel approach to how these bosses look and how they act, how they engage you, how you have to figure them out. It's not so much like, oh, look, there's a shiny part on their body. You have to hit that over and over and over
shoot
again.
Shoot the blinky part.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think, too, that it's important to introduce never before seen gameplay mechanics. And I think that's kind of what we just said is like, kind of one of the old classic ways was like, hey, shoot the big shiny glowy part. That's what you need. And, it worked for the time, and it was really popular in arcades in the 80s and that sort of thing. But I'm really happy to see how it's evolved since then. And finally, one of the other components to this is I think that what makes a good boss fight is one that actually helps to propel the narrative of the overall story forward. Even though like you may not be fed exposition necessarily, or maybe you are. Maybe like you whittle down the health bar to a point where then some dialogue gets said or whatever it is. But I think that's also really cool. So Steve, please tell me some examples of some of your favorite boss fights that supports these notions.
Well, for example, the last boss in Final Fantasy VII. So you've gathered all your little spells, you've leveled up, you've heard about the last boss for the longest time. The game is epic. It's and you finally get there, and they create like this opera song specifically for the last boss. And that, granted, this is PS1. This is not even like PS2. PS1. And so I'm listening to this opera. This boss is huge. And yes, it's still turn-based combat. But I'm looking at it thinking, okay, I've spent like over 100 hours in this game. And I know I'm tough, but I don't even know if I could take this thing down. But the entire experience is giving me goosebumps. And I don't want it to end. And even if it did end with me dying, I still wouldn't have a problem. There would be no rage quitting. It would just be like me. I can't wait to go defeat this boss again. And even after that boss, there was interactive cinematic sequences and just a huge reward. And, it had everything. It had the whole formula. It had the unpredictability. It had balance. It allowed me to exhibit my confidence of the abilities that I had gained throughout the entire adventure. And it had a huge level of magnificence. It had the entire formula.
Yeah, that was the one where I could go in and make myself a sandwich and come back when you were doing one of your ultimates, right? It took like 5 minutes.
Actually, no. That one was Final Fantasy VIII. So the one you're thinking of, and I actually have an example for Final Fantasy VIII too, but the one you're thinking of is, I probably was the last boss there, but a way to take him down quick was to use the most powerful spell in the game. But first you would cast a reflex spell on your entire team. So whatever hit your team would reflect, not just once, but like 3 times. And so each turn you'd cast the most powerful spell in the game 3 times. And so if you had every character equipped with it, then it was just that spell over and over and over again. In Final Fantasy VIII, they had quite the cinematic experience when you casted a very strong spell. Like it literally was about a minute and a half of you watching that same spell happen over and over and over again. So yeah, I think you actually I'm going to get a snack because this is the second time you've cast the same spell and it's a minute and a half. That'll allow me to go into the kitchen, get the bread, get the peanut butter, get the jelly. Maybe by the 3rd time you do a spell, I'll be having the bread together and come back in and join you. And that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, that was nuts. Well, one of the ones that I always have, I actually have this as a special place in my gaming heart of hearts, is Psycho Mantis from the original Metal Gear Solid game. And I think you were watching this with me back in the old days when we were playing at Mom and Dad's on the family room floor with those huge oversized pillows. But if you recall, at one point it looks like he had taken control of your ally Meryl and almost having you kill her, and then he starts to mess with your mind. And I thought from a game design standpoint, it was really cool because he taunts you by telling you that you play too many games. And if you recall, he actually lets you know what games you've been playing. Not that it was I don't think it showed every single game that you've played on the PlayStation, but I think it was for every Konami game you had played, it would actually list it on the screen. Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah, it was super cool. Apparently they had in the code or something like that, they were able to read the contents of the PS memory card, and any kind of ID tag that had a Konami game on there, it brought it up, which I thought was really slick. It was a really neat idea. And then he tells you, do you remember when he tells you or told me when I was the one who was playing it, you place the controller down on the floor to show you how powerful he is?
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah. That was insane. I had never experienced that, ever in a game before. And it's if you recall, you put the controller down and then he proceeds to rattle it around, psychically, basically. And then the battle begins, where you have to do this a few more times. And I remember I remember I was dying over and over and over, and I wasn't sure how was I supposed to beat this guy? And then suddenly you have to figure out that you have to unplug the controller from port 1 and place it into port 2, effectively making it impossible for him to quote, read your mind. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah. And he was super easy to take out after that. But I mean, it was such an aha revelation, in the sense that I had never ever experienced a game like that where they actually took the time to leverage the hardware technology of the PlayStation system itself into a boss fight and have it be something like that. I mean, as far as I know, I don't think there's ever been another fight quite like that. I think that has always been one of my top special boss fights that I'll never forget. And I think, honestly, I'd love to see more of that going on, especially with the types of options that are available in today's consoles and the next gen.
Yeah. It makes me think of, I remember there was a game on, nuts. I probably shouldn't even bring it up because I can't remember the name of it. But there's a game on GameCube that really screwed with your mind a bit where the boss literally made you think that the game had crashed. And so,
you're thinking of I think it's called Eternal Darkness, right?
I still remember what the title of the game is, but basically, yeah, I mean, so you would sometimes get that blue screen of death where like one of the chips in the cartridge or one of the hardware boards was corrupt or bad. So you get this blue screen like the BIOS needs to be completely reset or, you know,
I remember that.
You're like, oh crap, like right in the middle of this game like totally ruined my system. And actually that was software like screwing with you. And other stuff happened too. I don't remember, but I remember that part for sure.
Yeah, it was called Eternal Darkness. And the idea was that the protagonist, the main character you were playing as, was slowly, you know, at times would slip into madness. And it would happen very slowly and subtly. And you wouldn't really notice things at first, but the farther they slipped, the worse things got, to the point where the developers had actually created, I can't remember how many, there had to have been at least 20 different ways that they would mess with you. Because I remember there was one in particular where, like I remember the blue screen that you talked about, and that freaked. I mean, even my girlfriend at the time and we were playing, and that really freaked both of us out, thinking that like, oh no, the system is like just completely just corrupted or whatever. But it wasn't. The one that got me though was we were playing the game, and all of a sudden I see a fly that landed on the TV. It was like kind of like in the corner and stuff. And it was like moving around, and so I got up off the sofa to get up and go and shoo the fly off the TV screen. And when I got up to the TV, I realized it was part of the game.
Didn't they have something too where they screwed with the hue and all the colors and everything?
Oh,
and
yeah.
So and it wasn't just, we're changing the game from red to blue or to green. It literally looked like you would see the green bar. I think, you know, like on a Magnavox TV or something, you would see the bar, like the same bar as if you grabbed your TV remote and you clicked on there to adjust the settings on your TV. It looked really like the same. If it wasn't the same, it looked really like just too close. But it would start to adjust like your TV settings, and it would look literally like your TV was doing it on its own.
Yeah, no, there were quite a few of them. I'm trying to remember the one that you're describing. I kind of remember that one. It was a while ago. Do you remember any of the other ones?
No, that was it. I remember the fly one though, because I remember you telling me about it.
Yeah, because I think, let's see. I looked it up here. Yeah, so there's the blue screen of death. These are the visual screen environmental effects of when your sanity meter reaches too low or whatever. You have blood will drip from the walls or ceiling. Paintings will change appearance. I remember that. Heads of statues will follow your movements. Yeah, I remember that. The game will appear to delete your saved game. I remember that. I remember that freaking me out because I was like, what the heck? That was crazy too. Yeah, bugs will crawl across the screen. Nails will scratch across the screen. I don't know if I ever saw that. This is the one I just told you about. A fly will buzz around the screen. The television will appear to have turned off. Room-specific objects will float in the air. Yeah, entire sequences of play will turn out to be a hallucination, reverting to a prior point in play. That's crazy.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there are other things too where, oh my gosh, there's a ton of stuff they did in here. So like that, the ones I were talking about was just the visual, like your TV screen, environmental effects. They have more where, and again, this is digressing a little bit off because these are not necessarily boss oriented things, but yeah, these are just too cool not to talk about. Like for control and character effects, a message appears alerting you that controller 1 is not connected. Your character will grow larger or smaller during movement. I remember that. The environment will be upside down and you will walk on the ceiling.
I remember that, actually.
The character's body will break apart as you walk. Casting spells will cause you to explode. Anyway, it goes on. And there's even audio effects too, where the audio will all of a sudden just mute. Crying and whispering can be heard in the background. Yada, yada, knocking, creaking floor. Yeah, you may hear. Da, da, da. So anyway, yeah, super cool game. And yeah, there is a little bit of a parallel with that with regards to Psycho Mantis. But what is another boss that you have listed there, Steve?
So anyhow, I mentioned Final Fantasy VIII. I might as well just go into it. This was I forgot what the boss name was, but this is basically the end of the first act of the game where, you're starting to play the game and the game itself had a lot more color to it and the graphics are better and the spells look better and the sound was better. Everything was took a notch up. And as you're trying to exit this military compound that you're on, this kind of spider robot. There always seems to be a spider robot in Final Fantasy, but anyway, what's the deal with spiders and robots? I don't know. Keeps following you. It's almost like if the Terminator was a very bulky spider that was about 10 times your size, with cannons and laser beams attached to its head. Kept coming after you, and it had like these self-healing aspects to it, and you just couldn't kill the thing. And if I remember correctly, in the game, you only had so much magic. Like before, your character was exhausted and just couldn't do any more magic. And I'm going, okay, I'm literally done. I've wiped out my health potions. I'm getting low on magic. Like what's going on? Because I think you had to take like an ether or something before you can get more magic. And I was running close to I don't know what else to do. And there were sequences where you would hurt the boss, and then they're like, okay, he's defeated. Go ahead and go. And so you'd go, and then he would pop up again, and you're like, oh man. And he would look kind of broken, but he would kind of heal himself, and that kept happening again and again and again and again. I'm like, and finally, I'm on the beach and I'm about to board this military boat and I'm trying to escape the thing. I just want to leave. I'm like, how do I fight this thing? I'm going to die. And it was a pretty intense moment. I mean, it was really well written, but then one of my little crew members like breaks away from my party. I'm like, what's going on? Jumps in the military boat and brings up this huge turret. No, it wasn't huge, about, regular sized turret, but started just peppering this thing as much as they could to allow me to get away. And finally, this boat, which looked really cool too, could jump in the water too. That's pretty cool. Anyway, we escaped by the skin of our chin. And I've actually gone back on YouTube to watch people defeat that boss again and again because it's really cool to watch and to play and to turn up very loud.
Right on. Another example I have here is actually Thunderjaw from Horizon Zero Dawn. I don't know if you're familiar with which creature this is, but this was essentially kind of the cyborg T-Rex.
Yeah, I figured it'd be a T-Rex.
There you go, Stu. Well, this was actually that there were several, and what's interesting is that this game was unique in the sense that they didn't really have bosses per se, where like, you've gotten to a boss and you vanquish the boss and you go on to the next level. But what they did instead was they had this very live, lived in, organic environment. And as you were able to reach and traverse certain areas that were perhaps unreachable or untraversable, that you could find some of these very high tech, almost like tomb like places where you'd go in and you'd see one being constructed. And it was like kind of like the first time you'd see it. And then if you were successful in defeating it, then you were able to actually find it kind of more and more prevalent out in the open of this huge, vast landscape. But so I thought it was always cool because with regards to the Thunderjaw, it goes down my list where the showmanship side of things, I mean, it was so big, and every encounter I had with it, even though it got easier, it still felt like this life or death situation where you had to really be on your toes. You had to utilize different arrows in your quiver, and you had to utilize different traps and stuff in order to take it down. And it was all like, I never once got bored with having to fight one of those things throughout the game. And the game is pretty long.
Right.
And when it came to, testing your skill, I mean, it did. Definitely the first time I was playing, I mean, I was like, wow, this is insane. But it really had a lot of that with virtually every new type of cybernetic creature that you came across. But the Thunderjaw was definitely, for me, it took the cake. And in terms of expecting the unexpected, it had all kinds of weapon systems on there, and also discovering the fact that like I could knock off certain weapon systems and use them against the Thunderjaw. There were a lot of really well thought out game design decisions when it came to this type of combat. And that goes right into my fourth thing, was introduced never before seen gameplay mechanics. I do think that utilizing a boss's weapon or some sort of accessory against it is not necessarily new. I think it has been done on other types of boss fights, but I was really glad to see the organic approach in Horizon Zero Dawn for this. And if you see that in other boss fights, that's what makes, in my opinion, a good boss fight.
There you go.
So, and of course too, when you look at these different creatures, it did help to propel the narrative. Even though they didn't speak English, it was helping to drive, and I'm not going to spoil it, but the further you got, it really did play directly into what the overarching story was about. Steve, back to you.
Well, my last example, being sensitive to time here, Russ.
Uh-huh.
I would say the first boss, which kind of goes a little bit against what I say for my formula, but the first boss in The Witcher. Because if you remember the trailers to the game, they actually show the boss and they show you defeating the boss. And you're like, okay, I'm used to watching game cinematics on screen where that may or may not happen in the game, but most likely it's not. They're just trying to make it look cool for marketing purposes. But then the very first part of the game, you're fighting that creature like, I'm just learning how to walk and not like constantly run into things. And now I have to fight this huge entire creature knowing magic and blocking and using spells and using bait to make sure this creature gets to where I need it, and traps, and like, what do I do? But
this is totally like not on topic, but I, for one, would love if there was one, just a moment during the Witcher Netflix show where Henry Cavill just starts walking into a wall as if he was being controlled by a character and they can't figure out how to get through the door. Anyway,
or he just keeps on like rolling continuously, like roll one way, stand up, and then like roll the other way, stand up, and then roll like, what is he doing? Hey,
getting
have you guys ever played the game?
And dirtier.
He looks at all like the screen stuff. He's like, this happens in the game. Haven't you guys ever played it? This happens all the time. Every boss fight. Like,
yeah.
And I need to stuff massive quantities of apples and fish and breads and cheeses down my pants so I can eat them at any given time and regain my health.
Exactly. Or like he'll be running straight into some big battle and nothing but a loincloth.
Right.
Like, what? Anyway, so yeah, just in the sake of time, I have a few other examples here that I'll just kind of I'll roll into something. But so Sekiro, of course, that was
I knew you were going to mention that one.
Indeed, it was my game of the year pick for 2019. And rightfully so, just because every single boss fight that was in there was completely epic. It was meticulously crafted and designed in such a way that it forced you to get good at every turn. And it was done so in a way that I've never experienced before in terms of the intensity. Not only that, though, when it came to the showmanship, every single boss had its very exclusive own sense of showmanship. And I can easily remember each battle that I had because of that. It certainly tested my skill. In terms of expecting the unexpected, I didn't know what to expect. Every time I came across a new boss, I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? And it was a joyride to be able to go through all that, because it was so well thought out. And of course, when you think of introducing never before seen gameplay mechanics, that was another thing too, where it wasn't just me. If you look on YouTube and you see people playing different bosses from Sekiro, we all have a collective same type of response, which is interesting because the responses themselves are unique to what happens with each one of the boss fights. It's not like we have the same response for every boss fight in Sekiro. And so it was really fun to be able to see that and go, okay, yeah, I wasn't the only one who struggled with that. And oh yeah, I wasn't the only one who was shocked by that. And so it was super cool. And it definitely propelled the narrative of the story. So I thought that was certainly neat. One other one I was going to talk about, and you actually mentioned it earlier, was Castlevania Lords of Shadow, where there are several types of boss fights in there that I think meet the same type of criteria. And ultimately, I think it's just for you and I anyway, it is ingrained in our psyche and geekery, so to speak, of just when you think of those different boss fights, whether it was like Satan at the end, and that was like a huge thing, or if you were taking on the Werewolf King, or if you were taking on I don't know if it was called a Titan or what, but it was that thing that was made of all those rocks and stuff, and you had to climb up its hand and arm and leg and stuff, and it was so massive in scale. So, and there are more out there, believe me. There are a lot of other types of boss fights that, whether they're from the 8-bit, 16-bit days, like Mega Man had a lot of really cool boss fights and others. But I think what's really important to also mention is that Steve and I would love to hear your thoughts on which boss fights were memorable to you. And if you have any kind of thoughts or comments about what you think goes into making a good boss fight, you should drop us a line on either Twitter or Facebook or any of the other social media platforms. But that wraps up this episode of Joygasm. Make sure you tune in next week when we review Bad Boys for Life, the movie. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to check out patreon.com/Joygasm. That's spelled Joygasm. And consider becoming a monthly contributor. You'll get exclusive perks and early access to the show. Not to mention, it really helps us continue doing what we love to do. Also, you can follow us on social media and YouTube. Just do a search for Joygasm TV. Last but not least, search Joygasm TV on Twitch to see us stream our gaming adventures every Wednesday night. We will see you all